All right, week 5. Just jump on into part 1. Discuss with your partner how you feel about the way elders age in America and what dynamics you see playing an important role in detecting, preventing, and reporting elder and or dependent adult abuse. Um, yeah, do you want me to start us off?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Um, yeah, I think the first thing that comes up is how susceptible elders are to abuse, and I'm specifically thinking of like financial abuse of like someone coming in, or like even the telemarketers like that call and they're like, "What's your social security number?" And it's like I think and the susceptibility comes from the loneliness or like the lack of maybe um being around other people to like engage with like, "Oh, I got this weird call," or like, versus if you're alone, someone calls you, like maybe they're lonely and so they like lean into that and it's like actually hurtful or detrimental. So I think like keeping in mind that the way elders age in America, they're not very supported here. I think there's not a lot of like support in the transitions that happen from like even retirement to from working to retirement, and then as you get older, I just feel like it gets like less and less resources that are available or at least known for elder people. So I think awareness and more support, like more programs, more community, because I feel like there's so many changes that are happening. And especially as you get older, it's like the thought of all of those changes by yourself is just like really scary and sad. Yeah. Anything come up for you there?
Yes, I agree. I feel like isolation is like the biggest risk factor probably for um elder and dependent adult abuse and neglect. It's like when I feel like so much of morality comes from community and like we keep each other in check, from
Mm.
like falling into our less noble ways, like when we know that we're being seen. And so like yeah, when there's isolation, it's like an easy place for people to take advantage and also for people to like lose their sense of morals because they like kind of know they're not being seen. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, it just seems like one of like the many negative ripple effects of the isolation we have in this country for elders because they're no longer kind of embedded in the village and in homes of their family of origin. And we like want to outsource care that's not glamorous, uh,
Mhm.
and have someone else step in. Um, but then there's that opening for harm to happen. And also, like you said, like with technology, I'm thinking about like there's like that higher level of vulnerability with elders having limited technology skills because I work with
Mhm.
elders at my job and it's such an important need. Just for elders to have the resources and awareness to know how to prevent, like to be empowered to know the signs that they might be getting taken advantage of, especially financially. Um, so yeah, in terms just like social programming, social support, and like community
Mhm.
centers and so I feel like as a therapist to look at like more specifically at this question is it from a therapist, I feel like doing like a thorough assessment is super important to like
Mhm.
know if the elder you're working with is really isolated and like I don't know. Sometimes I feel like, I mean, I thought about studying social work instead of the MFT because I think they both have strengths and weaknesses.
Mhm.
But as an MFT, like I would really like to be able to hold that social work lens at times. And it feels like that's something really important. Like it's like you can like work on the emotional needs of the elder that you're working with or dependent adult. But I mean, I guess for everyone, but it just seems like especially
Mhm.
important to know if they have support in their life and if they're vulnerable to being taken advantage of. And that would be like a treatment goal to expand their social support network. Um, for many reasons, including to prevent potential harm. Is
Yeah.
what I'm thinking about.
Well, right. And I think, I mean, mental health, as we know, it's just, it's in everything. It's connected to everything. And, if a lot of your friends and family have died too, like there's like, feel
Hmm.
like unexpressed grief and a lot of just emotions that people in America aren't comfortable sitting with, especially older generations. I feel like it's getting a little better in America, but like it, you know, I'm thinking of I have a great aunt who's 92 and yeah, just like very set in their ways, right? Of like, we don't talk about a lot of things or like, um, but again, because yeah, that isolation of like, this is just how it is in this generation versus the like connecting with younger people or just like being a part of different groups or, yeah, the social aspect is so connected to mental and like holistic well-being. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. And like the family in America, like the culture of like family in America is so different than like South America or it's like when we're 18 here, we move away from the nest. And it's like that's not the case for a lot of other cultures. And it's like the family is primary and we like care for our elders and like we don't do that here. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Should we hop into number two?
Yeah. Sounds good. So child abuse mandated reporting. We're going to talk about scenarios where we might be legally mandated to report, but might decide not to and risk penalties. Yeah, based on kind of the like consequences of reporting.
Hmm.
So one example that seems pretty obvious, and I feel like it was like hinted at in the slides for this week, but that new law from 2016 requiring mandated reporting if a minor looks at a sexually explicit image from another minor. I think that was basically the language, like basically uh like pornographic selfies, that you would have to report that. And it does seem very tricky. Like when I think about a 17-year-old looking at us, like consensually looking at an image that another 17-year-old sent and like having to report them and break confidentiality, um, for something that doesn't seem like it's causing harm to anyone and would really harm the therapeutic relationship and could like create a lot of, I mean, I'm not really sure what the fallout of that is. Is it like
Hmm.
I'd have to know more about it, but it seems like at least there would be a big consequence to the therapeutic relationship. Like it might just end it. Like I can
Hmm.
imagine a young person being like, "You're overreacting. Like I don't trust you anymore. I'm either not going to see you at all, or I'm going to completely shut down." But it
Hmm.
sounds like there might be legal consequences too, and like a fine or like, yeah, just um so that seems like a strange one, and I'm curious how like strict the law is around the mandated reporting of that. I mean, I can see like it just seems so case dependent. If it was
Hmm.
someone being harassed and being sent images, even though they ask for that to stop happening, then yes, of course, there something needs to be done to intervene. But it seems like sometimes the law has good intentions, but it goes too far and loses all the nuance of situations where there's really not anything harmful happening. So
Hmm.
that was a big one that came up right away for me when I was reading this question.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point. It's like the law, it's like there's no emotion, there's no, I mean, I guess it's hard. It's like it is case by case, but it's also, the law is like all encompassing, but that doesn't like really mix with like human complexity and like it just like can't, it's not, it like can't be a blanket for all of us kind of thing. Um, it's important, but at the same time, so is like intentionally going into each scenario, right? Each person has experiences, um, yeah, there's just that you can't like, there's no one size fits all, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I can see that they're trying to add a lot of nuance to the laws with the, like, if they're under 14 and the other person is 10 years older, then this happens. And then,
Hmm.
um, but then that is really confusing to navigate for all the people that are trying to figure out if it's mandated reporting. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not really sure there's another way because it's important for there to be laws. And if
Right.
it's not complex, then they're going to be like um really misattuned to the nuances of each situation. But the more you try to tailor them to the diversity of situations that show up, it's also very complex to navigate on the end of the people trying to determine when to report. But
Hmm. Yeah, and just to round it out, um, another possibility, I think that would definitely, I mean, from personal experience, we chatted about it before we hit record. But I think when I think of, I just have a lot of secondhand experience with like alcoholism, drug abuse within my family of origin, and um, I think that where trying to, yeah, decide how much to share, but I think that like say you have I'm the therapist, my client shares that their husband relapsed and their child was they have a child, and I think like that is an endangerment because they're all under the same roof. But if my client is, you know, sober and is doing her best, took the child away for, it is sharing these pieces about what happened. I think, yeah, technically the therapist would have to report, but I think it would cause a lot of harm because then that child would get taken away and put into the system where, or like, whatever, it's like the judgment call, um, and like weighing it's tough though, because it's like if even risking penalties and your consequences of your license and taking a chance of like, oh, well, she did all these different steps to get the child into safety. So it's like, I'm really word vomiting here, but like to me, if I'm the therapist, like that looks like the mom knows best what to do for their child in this situation, and like that wouldn't mean that like the child needs to like be removed from both of those parents because one parent is currently like unwell. But again, like case by case, because that could mean different things for different families, like if one parent's unwell, that could really throw off the other parent, and then the child is still endangered. So I think it's like, um, that's a scenario that I could see if I'm to report, like I would hold off, I think.
mhm. Yeah, that's the biggest one that comes up is like trying to predict the future in a
Mhm.
situation, and when as a clinician, you're like, it seems like the child is better off in this imperfect situation and that it would be causing them potentially more harm or like just that there'd be more consequences. Um, if I were to report and then have CPS get involved and have the family broken up and like either way, there's all this potential harm, and having to weigh basically the chances of it being more or less harmful seems really difficult. Like I just because I've heard many horror stories about what happens in the foster care system. And I also have a relative who's been taking in foster children and adopting multiple children for like the last 30 years. And I mean, I might not know it seems from the outside like she's providing something really beautiful
Mm-hmm.
for the children that she's taken in. And so, if a lot of harm is being caused and they could be placed with a really healthy nurturing family, like
Mm-hmm.
that is better. But I know that's just a really imperfect system and they have a hard time finding placements and that harm happens. And so, yeah, I think that would be a huge moral dilemma, but definitely in a situation where, technically you're mandated to report, but you can see that a lot of efforts are being made and that it seems like the family is navigating, well enough. Um, it might be the right thing to do to not report or to like, I'd like to understand more. I mean, I think ideally we're practicing within the law, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so is there a way to just like be really explicit, like if you tell me this, I'll have to report, like so that you can kind of navigate with the client,
Mm-hmm.
um, without breaking the law ideally, but you might need to in order to act ethically, but to like be able to hear what they're sharing and keep the lines of communication open
Right.
without crossing a point of no return. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. And weighing, whether you tell a client, like, if you tell me this, I'm gonna have to report, it's like, does that shut them down? Does that, like, it just, that's like a risk in itself as well, but it's also, yeah, again, like communication and keeping the line open, which I think, personally, that's what I want, but maybe to other people that may be really scary, or like, maybe that type of communication of like open, like honest, well-intentioned communication could also be like really dysregulating, to a client or um yeah, so very complex.
So complex.
And I'm imagining like this happening in a session, and in my body it feels like really fast and like really like, oh, like ooh, and it's like just imagining that, and it's like, whoa, like what would I be able to do to like slow down my own, my rate, and just like, because if you're in like a 50-minute session, I don't know, it's like it just seems so intense.
Yeah, definitely. It's cool to know that there's like, I saw that there's like a hotline for a lot of, I don't know if it's the BBS or like where it's located, but that you can call and be like, this situation is happening. Do I need to report?
Mm,
Because I'm just thinking about like the law saying that you have to report like basically like immediately as soon as possible.
mm-hmm.
It's not a lot of time to like just like reach out to your network and like
Right.
get good consultation. So it's cool that there's like a hotline for that at least.
Yeah.
Because making the decision by yourself just seems like kind of impossible when there's like a lot of complexity and nuance. But I'm imagining the hotline is more like legal, this is what the law says you have to do though, rather than like
Mm,
being able to weigh like, is it worth risking jail and fines and your license to
yeah.
not report because you really ethically don't want to cause further harm. So yeah. All right. I
Yeah.
guess we talked for about 20 minutes. Whoops. That keeps happening. It's hard to keep it short, but any
Yeah.
final words?
No, I think, yeah, I think I'm complete.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.